Hey, what's going on? It's Musa, the mental mechanic, author of the book Forever Fearless. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Callie, and she is a licensed crisis interventionist. So, Callie?
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. It's really awesome. You and I can sit down and talk. We do a lot of work in our community. So it's cool to, combine some work together and just kind of speak on mental health and just, trauma and overcoming life, trials and
situations. Absolutely. And I don't say this lightly, especially because I know thousands of people, but after hearing your story, I quickly realized that you are one of the strongest people I've ever met in my life. Because of all the things that you've had to deal with, literally from birth. Just the fight, the tension, the uncertainty, like you said, possible abandonment. But I won't stir your flame with your story. I will let you go into it. So, again, starting from the fact that you were born in China and then...
Yeah, so I was born in China. I was born in '96, so it was during a time where China had their one-child policy law. Now, just a side note, now it's a lot more fluid. It's not as strict, but back then, you could only have one child. But if your first child was a male, then you were able to have another child. So a lot of families had that, quote-unquote issue of having their first child being a female, which is why the majority of orphanages in China are filled with female babies.
Wow.
So for me, when I was born, I was found at the gates of the orphanage. So, we were talking earlier, I don't even really know my actual date of birth.
Crazy.
The other thing that I, dealt with as a kid was that, I started meeting other girls who were also adopted from China who have, lived in an orphanage. I actually know 5 girls that were in the orphanage with me at the same time. We all got adopted at different, times. But it was really interesting because we all have the same exact story, that we were found, outside the orphanage, and our date of birth was the day that we were found. And, it threw me off a little bit, but also at the same time I was like, okay, like whatever, right? So then I decided to do 23andMe, and it says that I'm from a total other opposite side of China from where my orphanage was. So then that added more doubt to my own identity, because now I'm like, all right, well, I can't picture a birth parent traveling that far to put me in an orphanage to then go all the way back home. But we all have that same story. Some of us, our 23andMe does say we're from where the orphanage is, and others it's miles and miles and miles away. So
because you said the place is like 5 hours away.
Yeah, so I think even with that, not even having an answer to that, and us all realizing that we all have the same exact story.
That's crazy.
We were found. It's just impossible.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're telling you that you have the same story. It's almost like it was like a movie.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are just mass produced, and it's lab, and then this is the background that we're giving you.
Right.
And that's I'm not gonna lie, that is scary. You know what I mean? Or just unsettling, where it's like you don't know, right? Because I think so much of this, what's helped me battle so many things in life, is also understanding where I came from. Right? Also, even in school, when teachers used to be pretty much call me dumb all the time, right? I mean, all the soul classes, and teachers used to make fun of me, the kids used to make fun of me, and then I'd be like, no, because my grandfather was the chief of his tribe, and he was an innovator, and he used to create huts that would stand, so that when the water and the mudslides would come, the huts wouldn't get washed away in Sierra Leone. I was like, and my father's a chemist, and my mother's an RN.
So I'm definitely not dumb.
You see what I'm saying? It's like, you have something to pull from. You have some kind of foundation, and that's why it's so important that all of us become great as well, because I pull from the strength of my parents' stories. So the fact that you're out there all alone, kind of just drifting in the water of life, and being just trying to find some kind of anchor to be able to kind of hang your hat on, or plant your ship on. This is where I'm from. This is where I belong. This is what I'm from. You know.
Yeah, we were talking at lunch. How what's exciting now being an adult. Having control over who I am with in a relationship. It's kind of lessened the depth of trauma of being born and raised in an orphanage and not knowing anything about myself but what I'm being told. Because now, I can have a child of my own, and actually from that, I could learn a lot about my medical history. Because, I go to the doctors, they're like, do you have a medical history? And I'd when I was younger, it was really embarrassing to be like, I don't even know, you know, and,
Wow.
and to this day, sometimes they'll be like, do you have any medical histories? And I'm like, I don't know, like I was adopted.
Yeah.
And that even causes sometimes some issues because I'll have something come up health-wise and they're like, okay, well, we don't even know, is this a genetic thing, a family thing? Is this something that just came up out of the blue? You know, and so even the identity in your medical history is something that is comforting for a lot of people to know.
Right,
you know,
right.
like I have friends that are like, oh, I have my mom's ears and my dad's nose, and my mom's also allergic to peanuts, and my dad has really bad acne, which is why I have bad acne, you know. So for me, it's kind of like I'm just like meeting myself for the first time so many times.
Right.
You know.
Wow, that's such a powerful statement. Meeting yourself for the first time so many times.
Yeah.
Where honestly, it's like life is a test to a certain degree, and you know, until I spoke with you, I didn't realize how many answers I've been given to life for that test.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah. And I think, you know, I just came to a point in life where it was like, at the end of the day, like, I'm proud to say that I raised myself, you know, and I didn't do it perfectly, obviously, because if, you know, you can't go to a kid and be like, raise yourself, have fun. They're not going to do it perfectly. But, you know, it has been a blessing for the people, you know, that came into my life that helped me through and to teach me a lot of things. You know, like I went to my girlfriend's house and she lives with her boyfriend, and even just seeing them to interact and them to, you know, be in love with each other and go through struggles together and argue or not argue, whatever the case may be. I never witnessed that as a kid in a healthy way, you know, but it was really cool to say, wow, like I want my household to be like her household, you know, and but prior to that, like I didn't have that example. So for me, now being an adult, having different relationships and friendships with different people and seeing how they were raised, it now is giving me a blueprint, you know, because a lot of kids are saying, you know, I want the traditions of my, you know, that I had when I was a kid, like for Christmas or this holiday, you know, I didn't have that, but it's been really cool to now know that I can create any tradition I want from the ground up, you know, and that's a powerful testimony for my kids to know that, you know, mom did this herself. Like mom created this environment and this household for herself, you know, and this is what I want, you know.
No, absolutely. It's a lot, right? You know, to even hear this has really happened to someone like as bright and as awesome as you, right? But again, it's like, you know, life sometimes throws you curveballs or the wind blows, but it also depends on how you choose to take it, you know. So even though you had a lack thereof, obviously it sounds like you want to be that and that much more for your children. You know?
You know, I'm at it. We were talking about how like when I was a kid, I always wanted to get married when I was 25, have my first kid when I was 27, my last kid when I was 35. I don't know
plans
why,
we have for life.
But it was like, this is exactly what I want. But now I'm 26 years old, single, so I definitely don't have a kid.
She's single, yo. Gang.
But you know, like I'm at an age where it's like, this is really cool. Like I really can create my own life, you know, and I don't, you know, I know a lot of kids will say, you know, like they have the struggles of wanting to create their own lives and their parents have this vision for them, and that causes a lot of stress for the kids growing up because they feel like they have to be a certain way, right? But for me, I have the freedom to literally create any type of household I want, and I know no one's gonna judge because I don't have parents that are gonna judge me for it, which is bad, which is sad, but it's also like I have this really cool freedom to do that.
No, that's real. That's awesome. Though. So I'm definitely excited, obviously, for your life, and I'm excited that you have things to be excited about. You know, because especially with the things that you've been through, 99% of people on the planet have not been through that, right? You know, and it can be so easy to be gloom and doom and look what I've been through in life, and like, no, like she done really been through some stuff, right? But the fact that you can still take that and be like, yeah, but look what I'm looking forward to.
I mean, and that took a lot of cognitive therapy. It took a lot of work to kind of get to that point, because, you know, in the very beginning, that was my mentality. It was like I felt doomed. Like even though I was out of that environment, I was like, I can't hold a relationship, can't hold a job, can't pay my bills, cannot commit. Like I would commit to everything, and like not one single commitment I ever actually followed through. But it wasn't because I was careless or didn't care. It was like I literally just mentally didn't have the ability to commit to a commitment. You know, and
that's it. You got bars today.
But I had to learn, like, okay, like, yes, you know, yes, I was trafficked, and yes, this happened, and yes, it's hurtful, and I think you know, I'm super involved in like the Alcoholics Anonymous world, because I kind of, you know, brought that back into like my healing journey and identifying where my addictions have led me and, and you know, whatnot. And one of the biggest things we learned is like, how do we nurture what we've gone through, nurture the trauma, but how do we turn that around and say, okay, like I'm gonna help the next person. And you know, for those who aren't really familiar with like AA and stuff, there's like 12 steps that you go through. You know, it's like self-identity, identifying your higher power, and each step has a prayer. And the third step, part of that prayer is take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness to those I help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And that is like the ultimate purpose of life. It's like you go through crap, you learn how to overcome it, and the victories that you have in it, you can teach somebody else and actually save them years of pain that you had to figure out. You can save them years of that. You know, like I have an Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor, and she constantly will be like, you know, like no one told me this until 2 years after me going through all this. I'm saving you 2 years of pain and telling you this now. Don't do it. You know?
No, for sure. And hopefully people are wise enough to take that, because some people are like, well, I gotta get burned before. I was like, oh, okay, if you want to be like sizzling like a Friday dish, then cool, right? But it's like, man, if you could see the car crash coming, it's like, man, steer away from it now. You know, so again, man, just incredible job on your side.
Thanks. Chinese orphanages are females because of that law. You know, so for me, I was found at the gates of the orphanage. From documents and paperwork, I already had my umbilical cord was basically coming off, which means that I was alive for at least a day or two prior to being found. But for legal documents, my date of birth is actually the day that they found me. You know, so growing up in that environment, like from date of birth, you know, I already was running into the societal issues and just government issues, which causes a lot of, you know, abandonment issues, but also it changes the trajectory of somebody's life. Even just societal issues that aren't even necessarily about you can affect you, right? You know, so for me, when I was 3 years old, I got adopted into a family in America who really struggled with mental health, who struggled with addiction, you know, had a lot of trauma of their own that never was resolved. They never worked through or even had the ability to work through it. So a lot of, and most of their traumas, you know, just got laid on me, which creates that generational trauma.
And you already had, you know, obviously issues from being adopted over in China to coming over there and then dealing with a family that took you in that had so much trauma as well.
And you know, I think for me, you know, we talked earlier how as a kid, like you don't necessarily know what's right or wrong. Your instincts might feel one way, but if you're being told another way is this way, even if it's uncomfortable for you, you tend to just accept that as your reality.
And what did you call that? You said
it's called radical acceptance. So it's a concept where you're able to accept and cope and navigate a situation that you cannot change, right? So one of the things that I do in my field of work is if somebody's getting arrested and you know they're going to get arrested, for them regardless of the crime, right? It triggers this psychological thought process of, oh my gosh, I'm going to jail, like, and you freak out. I mean, I would freak out if I had a sentence like that, whether I was guilty or not, right? So radical acceptance allows you to accept that as your truth, as your new life, and how do you psychologically work through that without causing more damage or causing extra grief to a situation that you cannot control already. So that, you know, was a concept that I had to learn a lot, you know, growing up, and especially in therapy, was just accepting, okay, this is my situation, and even now, like 7 years out of my trauma, there's still things that I have to accept, you know, when it comes to whatever complex PTSD symptoms I have, or dealing with just relationship building. You know, like for me, relationship building isn't a simple, like, let's go to lunch, okay, great, we're friends, and you know, it's a very like I have to like second guess, third guess, eighth guess, you know, like.
And so the whole second guessing, you know, just because obviously it was a major part of your story, in regards to, yes, we kind of glanced over the trauma with your family, but there's so much to unpack right there, right? You know, and so even as you mentioned certain addictions, like you would, just some of the things that you had to see when you were a child, right? So at 7 years old, you said that your parents... So at 7 years old, I got introduced to drugs. It was something that was not by choice. So for me, you know, in the recovery world, we tend to say that
we tend to say that genetically or psychologically you're born as an addict, but it's an addictive personality, like obsessive thinking, stuff like that. And then you add alcohol, you add drugs, it like feeds into that addiction. So for me, because I had my abandonment issues, I already had that obsessive thinking, like just twisted thoughts and just trying to understand life. And so when I was 7 years old and I got introduced to drugs, it just really it just took off. It was like a rocket, that just kind of flew off. And
for sure.
So for me, I was exposed to sex, drugs, and money, and that was just all I knew. My parents were doing it in front of me. I was doing it in front of them. I was doing it with other people.
And that part right there, I think, because it's already crazy that you were doing drugs at the age of 7, but the even more crazy part of it is who introduced you to drugs.
Yeah, it was my parents, so, we were talking earlier how, if you have a kid that's crying, and you tell them that they're okay, in their head they're gonna think, okay, I'm okay, even though I don't feel okay, I'm being told I'm okay, so this is okay.
For sure.
Right, so for me, it was like, I obviously knew drugs was not something that I wanted. It was uncomfortable. I didn't, like being high as a 7-year-old, but I'm being told it's okay, and I'm also seeing my parents, quote unquote, thrive in what they're doing. So for me, it was very perverted, right? So I saw success through drugs, and that was it. So for 10 years of my life, drugs got you wherever you wanted to go. You wanted to make money, you made money, right? You know? And so it was like kind of, now it's like rewiring my brain to understand basically every single thing I was taught and raised, that like those morals are completely wrong.
Right.
And it seems simple to know, like, don't have sex for money. It's a simple thing that many people don't even have to think about, and already, without even deep thought, can assume that's not good. But when you come from a trauma that I do, it's a lot of relearning different ways.
Absolutely. Because then you even mentioned, not only did your parents, who are entrusted with your life, they're the ones introducing you to drugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then also during that time, you mentioned that your father at that point had also been the one introducing you into sex trafficking.
Yeah. So I think for me, I came across just a plethora of different types of people, like different economic background, different educational background, and that's how diverse human trafficking is. It's not, just in one type of people or one look of people, And so that I think was even more confusing, right? Because for me, like, I came across people in law enforcement that were also involved in this type of industry, whether they were laundering the money or they were buying the victims for sex. And so it was just this environment where every single day there was always a different guy in my house, whether it was for me, for my parents, for somebody else. There was always drug deals going on.
And so that part right there, you said, it's either these sex people could either be in the house for you or your parents. And then you mentioned that at 7 years old, you were also watching your parents have sex in front of you.
Yeah. So for me, like, sex is such now, like, being an adult and having gone through the amount of healing, sex is a very sacred thing, right? Yeah. And it's something that we don't just openly talk about. Even with some of our closest friends, we filter what we say, right? But for me, growing up, sex was just like you and I eating at the dinner table, and nothing is not normal. Like, it was a very normalized, abused behavior. Right. And so, I was telling you earlier, like, so I grew up very promiscuous. I grew up very flirtatious. I also grew up very sexual. And so a lot of my relationships with other students, I was completely wrecking, because in my head, I'm like, I'm going to have sex with you. Yeah. As a 15-year-old, I'm like, I'm going to have sex with you. I'm going to try to flirt with my teacher. I'm going to try to, manipulate you to date me or something for me to only, like, screw you over at the end of the day.
Right. And so you'd also mentioned that, it's already crazy. 7, you're on drugs, you're watching your parents have sex, you're having sex for money at this point. At the age of 10, you mentioned that you also started a different path as well. Yeah,
when I got older, I, on top of the trafficking issue, we talked about the adoption, I had a lot of questions about who I was, and the older you get, and especially in elementary school age, they have you do a family tree and like, you know, who do you look like, and what could your kid look like, type of, you know, like fun and games.
We're laughing about that.
Yeah, and it's like I don't even know why we had to do those projects every single year.
Because your parents were, what do they look
Yeah,
like?
so like my parents are, you know, blonde haired, you know, brown eyed. They're like Italian, mix of Irish,
Just because mine are blonde hair with blue eyes.
Yeah.
So when people are like, yo, you're adopted, I was like, yo, whoa, bro, like, where are you coming from?
Yeah, but you know, as a kid, like, you know, psychologically, like for a baby, when they look at their mom, they're one, like they're one, they see themselves, right? So the older you get, though, you start to realize you look a little different than your mom, even if it's your birth parent, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, as I got older, I was like, yeah, I really don't look like anybody in my community. You know, I grew up in a rich white area, so I think there was maybe like 4 other Asians in my community, and maybe I was always the only Chinese girl in every single class. I don't think I've ever been in a class with another Asian woman or male. You know, and so when I got,
how did that make you feel?
You know, it was really interesting because, you know, like when I would talk to other girlfriends, you know, and they would like do makeup and stuff, something so simple like that, right?
Yeah.
My eyelids are different than other women's eyelids, right? So the way other women do makeup, I can't do it that same exact way because I don't know what they call it, but like just that the structure of my eyelid is just completely different, right? And so something even so simple like that, and then even growing up, there's all of the, you know, celebrities, rarely are they Asian. So I'm now trying to compare myself and try to be, you know, a brown-haired woman that has bigger boobs and a bigger, you know, body structure, and I'm trying to measure myself up to that. So I think that caused a lot of body dysmorphia, which I feel like we all go through body dysmorphia at one point as kids. You know, we see somebody else that we, you know, think is really attractive, we want to be that person, and then it perverts the way we look at ourselves.
For sure.
You know, so I think that was my biggest thing, was that I never had the hair that can curl the same way, because Asian hair is very stubborn when it comes to curling. Like I have to like use a whole entire bottle of hairspray just for it to stay for 1 hour.
That's
you
expensive.
know?
That's expensive.
Oh yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive.
Inflation.
It's real, man. But you know, it's like just so many little things like that, and I think growing up, it caused a lot of self-hatred. But also, you know, to be super vulnerable, you know, being Asian in the sex industry was very difficult. There's a lot of fetishes and kinks and a lot of fantasies that a lot of men and women have towards Asian women, on top of the fact that I was a minor. But I think that also caused a lot of trauma, just even within that, is being Asian and having sex. And even being an adult now, you know, like I'll, you know, meet a guy and for some reason, like, just being Asian is like the only thing they're hooked onto, and that's it. You know.
Understood. And it just even, and thanks so much for sharing those pieces. And kind of just to tie it together for them as well. You were 10 and you started working in the strip club.
Yeah.
Which you know, when you told me that's like crazy. To me. But the fact that was just right here in Miami.
Yeah, so I was raised up north, but every summer I would come down to Miami. So, you know, in Miami, for those who don't know, we have a lot of pay-by-the-hour hotels, and we also have a lot of strip clubs, like kind of a little too much strip clubs considering.
Every street.
It's literally every single street, there's something that's like a sex thing, and, you know, and being 10 years old, I got introduced to it, and it was just something that, again, it was so normalized, and that's what abuse does. It normalizes not normal, unhealthy things, and so for me, like, it was during the summer, I would go to a strip club, work a full shift with adults, other minors, you know, and get the money and hustle. And so, you know, I was raised to be very manipulative and very conniving. You know, and that's not something that, you know, I was ever proud of. You know, but, you know, I'm in my 8th year of therapy, and it's taken a lot of work to like not be that person, you know, to be the complete opposite of that. But being in the strip club industry, even as an adult, you're taught to hustle, you're taught to manipulate a little bit, to coerce a little bit, you know, to kind of fib a little bit to get more, you know, and so.
Understood. And so even with that, it's like, there's so many different areas that I want to touch on, but even in regards to almost reinventing yourself, right? Because really, it's almost like you didn't have a fighting chance to a certain degree, right? Because right from you being found from the orphanage, then you somehow get given to a family that now is having sex in front of you and also putting you in the sex trade, and then to the point where now you're 10 years old working as a minor, in a strip club, and being taught these things of like, oh, you're supposed to lie, you're supposed to do this, and after a while, like, no matter what we say, it's like, what you keep practicing, you become.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, to a certain degree. So it's like, it's like, how do you feel that you were able to, well, before I even get there, what would you say to some of the ladies who are thinking about even going into that world? Because obviously we can't change our past, right? But what we can do is influence other people's future. And I know that Miami is a place of quick money and I'm just gonna do it, and they feel like they can get in and get out and be untouched, and not know how it actually, like, I've talked to so many ladies who've been in that, it's completely crushed their soul.
Yeah, you know, I can't, you know, I always, like, when I get asked this question, I always have to be careful how I say it, you know, because, you know, the sex industry is an actual industry, right? People do make a living out of it, and I think, you know, that there's, like anything, there's pros and cons to it, right? And, you know, I don't ever like to speak as if, like, you're definitely going to get trafficked if you get into the sex industry, right? But if we can look, like, deeper into it, it's like, okay, why is there such a comfort level to do something like that? And are you doing it because you feel confident and you know it's only going to raise your confidence, or are you solely doing it for the money, or because that's all you were told that you were, or, you know, do you grow up in an environment where, you know, you started having sex young, or you had sexual abuse in the past, and it could be a dormant thought process of like, okay, if I can't get this job, I'm just gonna go strip. You know, I saw this TikTok of I think it was like Nicki Minaj or somebody, and they were like, why did you get into the strip club? Like, why did you start stripping? And her answer was, you know, I was trying to leave my abusive boyfriend and I needed money, and it was quick money. And like, I'm not gonna lie, like, you can make like a full like month pay that somebody does from 9 to 5 in one night. So definitely it like definitely great way to make quick money. But again, it's like, where can you find the respect that you have for yourself and that dignity, you know? And that took me a really long time, because, you know, even after I left my parents and left that situation, I was still stripping. And for me, like, I was so disconnected from the value that my body had and the gifts that God gave my body to do. I was so disconnected from it that it didn't faze me to be, you know, like, naked in front of women, other people, or women, or half naked, doing things that I wouldn't even do in front of my parents if my parents were not those parents, you know. And it's kind of, you know, connecting with yourself. And so, you know, you said something earlier about like reinventing yourself. You know, when I got out, I had to learn who I was, and I literally had to ask questions that I would ask somebody that I just met for the first time, like, what's your favorite color, what do you like, what don't you like? And I had to learn all of that, and I realized, like, I don't like having sex every day. Like, I just don't like that. But I also know I like this show and I don't like this show, and this is who I am, you know. Like, I was raised in an environment where I talk 10,000 times more than I do now, but like, I was raised in an environment to think that I was this super outgoing person, but I realized, like, I'm more of an introvert than I realized. You know, I have to be introverted to be extroverted. You know, and even something like that, personality wise, like, once you learn yourself. But yeah, I mean, going back to like choosing that as your career, I think it's just, you know, I never judge, I never say one way or another. I just always encourage, you know, people to really see, okay, what is your reason? You know, and is there trauma in your background, that there's something that needs to be worked out? Because when you have trauma in your background, your opinions and what you like and don't like will change when you heal from it. You know?
And even as you mentioned trauma, like, because, you know, as you were speaking, you mentioned that as you're helping people get accustomed to the radical acceptance, right? Even for the people that, like, I guess the pimps or the bad guys who get caught in the sex trafficking and they're about to go to jail, it's like, well, I mean, why wouldn't we want them to hurt and be locked away forever? And you caught me and you mentioned that maybe they had also dealt with trauma where that's all they knew in their life, you know. And it's very hard for us to break, especially when parents who are in our minds the most trusted people that we can have, or they are our guardians, are teaching us this way. It's like, who are we who haven't been through life to go against that until we're older?
You know, I'm a firm believer in this saying where it's like, an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. right? And that saying doesn't mean you justify or you know, excuse behaviors, because in no way, you know, do I excuse any behavior that somebody does, especially as a trafficker. In the same breath, though, if you really water it down, like if I didn't get the opportunity to go through the therapy that I went through, I would be doing the same thing my parents taught me how to do, which would traffic other people, manipulate other people, lie, and all this other stuff. So it's like understanding, okay, there's always a root to everything. Every behavior you do, good or bad, there's a root to it. There's a reason why you are who you are, or why you are becoming who you're becoming. You know, and so a lot of the people that I work with that do traffic other people, majority of them have tremendous sexual abuse past. Right. Majority of them at a very young age was exposed to gangs, was exposed to violence, and they survived and thrived more than doing what was right. But they also didn't even know what was right, because for them that was the way, that was the highway. Right. You know, and again, not justifying, but it's like looking at like to eradicate a societal issue, you have to nurture everybody in that issue, whoever is involved. For sure. You know, if you know, and that's because if we start objectifying pimps, right, and you know, I hear so many people say like, oh, like they deserve to die, or like, you know, they deserve to die in jail, and like, you know, I'm not gonna disagree, but I'm also not gonna agree, because if we're gonna monetize pimps and we're going to objectify pimps and dehumanize pimps, ultimately what we're doing is that we're dehumanizing somebody for dehumanizing someone else, expecting change, right? And there's
I get that too.
And there's people that, you know, come out of jail after serving a year or 10 years, whatever, you know, that are charged with sex crimes. But if they're not taught how to be different, if they're not taught how to work through their own trauma, work through societal trauma, because society traumatizes us all. But like if we don't work through any of that, they're gonna come out, and I've seen it. They come out and they go right back to what they were doing, which is like somebody in rehab with drug addiction. If you're a drug addict and get arrested, but you don't do, you know, the Alcoholics Anonymous program or narcotics program, and you don't have a sponsor, and you don't do all this work, you're gonna come out and do the same thing that you did.
Yeah, unless you're taught something different.
Right. Absolutely. Right. And so that's why, you know, I'm a huge advocate for, regardless of who you are, you know, there can be this spiritual awakening and this change in that person. You know, we're talking about in the Bible how, you know, one of the authors in the Bible, Paul, we read the Bible, and like he's written a lot of the Bible, but he was the one that murdered our brothers and sisters initially, right? Until God changed his life dramatically to where he is at now, or in the Bible.
No, for sure. You know, and obviously you've hinted toward it as well. And you know, again, as you're looking at your background with someone who's, you know, been from the beginning, you know, given up for adoption, going through that, I mean, you know, having parents, the drugs, the addictions, the overly sexualized life, you know, what caused you to change?
I think it's a rock bottom. I think we all hit emotional and physical rock bottoms. You know, we can only lie to ourselves for only a certain amount of time until we have to face the truth. You know, and I think for me, I came to a point, you know, when I was 17, where I was like, I literally physically could not handle any more of that trauma, but also just mentally. And when you come to a point in your life where suicide is like the only answer that you feel you have, that's a rock bottom. That's like the rock bottom of all rock bottoms. You know, is when you realize the only thing you think that can solve your issue is death. And you know, I came to that point, but I think that point was also the most pivotal point for a lot of people for change to happen. You know, and I think that was what was the you know, the engine in my car to like drive to figure out, okay, I need to fix ultimately a mess that wasn't even my mess to fix. Right. You know, but you know, they say it in the addiction world, like addiction is not your fault, but it's your responsibility to get your crap together ultimately, right? And that's what healing is. Like a lot of the things that you and I are healing from weren't even our faults. We never asked for it. We didn't even know it existed until it happened to us. For sure. But it's our responsibility to get our crap together. You know,
and the blessing is to a certain degree, you know, obviously, you know, just from a biblical sense, we realize that you will be tempted more than you can handle. Right? You know, and I think, the other side of that is, you know, committing that suicide or going the whole way, you know. So besides, like you said, hitting rock bottom, like what else would you attribute to, you know, the change in your life? Because it was a lot.
You know, I think it was definitely God, you know, because even when I got out of that lifestyle, I still, you know, was wired to think a certain way. You know, it wasn't until I moved down to Miami, I actually moved back down to Miami, which was probably, I don't know if that was the best idea in that time, but it did something good, because, you know, I was able to move into a safe house for women that were victimized by the sex industry or trafficking, you know, and learning who God was through all of that mess, because I think, you know, a lot of us can't wrap our heads around a higher power when you have so much crap in your past, because the most common question you have is, well, if God is real, then why did he let any of this happen?
Right.
And I've had to come to this understanding that, first of all, God didn't let anything bad happen, because that's not of God. God does not have the nature to do that. So I don't fully believe in the whole thing where people say, oh, God let this happen to teach me a lesson. Right. What I do believe, though, is that as powerful as God is as powerful as the enemy is. But within all of that, it's your choice of who are you going to be willing to be open to overcoming and getting through it. And I think
because it's your choice at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because the power that comes behind being willing to do anything good or bad is so powerful, and it's like it changes the trajectory of your life and those around you. So whatever you're willing to do, like,
or willing to not do indirectly. You know what I mean? Meaning like, oh, you're gonna stay in this comfortville. You know what I mean? You're gonna stay here because getting money's easy like this. Oh, or the change to, I'm gonna stop this. I might be homeless. I might lose everything. I might lose cars. But I want to make the change that bad, you know, and I think that you're an incredible testament to the strength of what you can do and what you can overcome when you put your mind to it, you know, and that's why, you know, it's like, I know dudes who could probably bench 400 pounds, but mentally, that, like, the fact that you've been doing that from birth, you know, because, like you said, from the insecurity to trying to figure out who you are to, you know, you're not even knowing, it, like, when you were actually born. When you mention that to me, it's like I actually indirectly wrapped so much of my identity up in just knowing when I was born. Yeah. You know, people always, oh, I'm a Scorpio. Does this even that sense is like gives you some kind of form of identity? Yeah. You know, or belonging. Yeah.
I mean, I identify as a Sagittarius because I'm a very fierce, intense person.
Oh, I don't like those.
But no, I mean, even it's as simple as that. It's just knowing your date of birth, or just knowing, you know, for me, I've never been in a family group chat. You know, I have so many friends who have family group chats, which, like, sometimes I'm glad I'm not in family group chats, because they seem like they get a little chaotic sometimes. So I've never had to exit a family group chat, which has been really nice to not go through that awkwardness. But yeah, I mean, it's really powerful when you know who you are and you know where you come from. It paves the way for your future, you know. And I think, you know, going back to the whole God thing, like when I went into the safe house, I had to learn that at the end of the day, you know, first my birth parents abandoned me, then my adoptive parents exploited me, and then the orphanage that I had, they did the best they could but couldn't do what you should do for an infant, right? For growth, for development. And so for me, it was like every parent figure in my life that I had, and I had 3 tries. Like, it wasn't like I just had 1 try, whatever. I had 3 different opportunities to have a parent figure, but all failed. And so I had to understand, like, my identity only and solely came from God. Yeah. And that was hard because, you know, we're taught that your higher power is a parent figure.
Reflective.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, you know, there's a lot of Christian songs out there that would be like, you know, you run to the safety of the Father, and you run to the comfort of your mom. And I remember one time when I heard that line in the song, like, I just cried because I was like, I didn't even know what that means. Yeah. You know, and it terrified me when, I think it's in Romans, where it's like, you know, like, we're adopted into this sonship with God. Yeah. And for me, I was like, I'm not doing this adoption crap anymore. Like, I did that, and that was messed up. And so I had so much rebellion. Like, I was so rebellious towards God in the beginning, which is why I kept prostituting and doing this other stuff, because for me, I felt safer with men and women that didn't care about me other than to have sex than I felt with people who wanted to know how my day was.
That's crazy.
And even something so simple like that, I had to change and rewire in my head and find a new identity of safety, because even safety has identity, right?
and even with that, right? Like, for us to have faith in God or to trust this person, it's like that's a fearful thing.
Oh, 100%.
You know, so for yourself, with pretty much everyone who's supposed to love and protect you and care for you and guide you, it's like, how do you beat the fear of just feeling that everyone's going to do that to you?
I think
or opening up.
I think the first thing is identifying that is a fear. And when you identify a fear that you have with yourself, it humbles you, and it really kills your ego. And no one likes their ego killed. Like, no one. You know, it's embarrassing. You know, even if no one knows about it but you. Like, have you ever just been embarrassed by yourself?
Oh, for
like,
sure.
You just sit there and you're like, wow, I'm so embarrassed I thought that.
Yeah.
But I think, like, even just acknowledging that fear for me was that, and it was a very claustrophobic feeling, right? Because life is about connecting with other people.
Yeah.
You can't do life without connecting with somebody, even at Starbucks, even at the stores, even at work, with your family, with your friends.
Yeah.
And so I had to first identify this was my fear. And, you know, over the past 8 years now, like, you know, I've had many friendships gone, come, which is normal.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, I had to learn how to have friendships. And it took very, very special people to be able to understand where I'm coming from and why I am the way I am, and why maybe relationships don't come easy to me. You know, like the other day, one of my girlfriends, we had, you know, like a conversation that was difficult and uncomfortable. So in my head, I'm like, all right, this relationship's done, and I was getting ready to walk out.
Yeah.
You know, meanwhile, like, you know, she texted me the next day, and I was just like, why are you texting me? Like, you know, in my head, I'm like, why are you like being nice?
Yeah.
And she was like, it was just like, we're allowed to have disagreements. We're allowed to, you know, have some doubts and work through it together, you know? And I think that's what helped me get through that barrier of fear, was because I saw people who gave me second chances if I messed up, or when I gave them a second chance. And I think it's experience. I think experience is what really helps us work through a lot of our fears. Because you know, we fear swimming, but then all of a sudden, you know, you're at the beach, and you're like, oh, I'm closer to the water. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can go in now the next day, you know. And it's that psychological, you know, thought process in your head. So it's like exposing yourself to your fears in a healthy way, obviously.
No, for sure. You know, but exactly what you were saying. It's like, because, you know, even in the book, I talk about, you know, fear could either stand for false evidence appearing real, you know, as an acronym, or face everything and rise, right? Yeah. And it's like, you can't face something that you don't even know is there, you know. And so first, the biggest thing is identifying that. Okay, cool, it's humbling, but at least I know that now I can charge at it. Like, I have a target to hit, I have something to a mountain to conquer, in that regard. So I appreciate you for even having the courage to do this assessment and become self-aware enough to be like, you know what, hey, these are issues. And then even, like I said, having the mental strength and the humility paired with the strength to be like, maybe I can't take care of this alone. Right. You know what I mean? Because there are certain, as strong as I think that I am, there are certain things that I'm so grateful that I've been blessed to have strong brothers and sisters around, or friends around me to help me battle this thing through, you know, when we're going through it. And that's, I think, the beauty of life, is the people that you choose to do life with, you know. And so, you know, we talked about family, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately to a certain degree, like the people that you've had, like you really don't know what your blood is. You've done 23andMe, and you know,
I'm only 80% Chinese. You know, like, even that was like, wait, what?
Yeah, you know, you said another 20% is African, Nigerian, right? Oh, you know a lot. You feel me? We out here,
maybe 0.1%, maybe somewhere.
Oh, for sure, somewhere. But it's the fact of blood can make you like related, but doesn't necessarily make you family. Yeah. You know, and it comes down to the people that you choose to do life with that make you family. My brother Parker, I love him. He's as close to me as my actual only real blood brother. You know what I mean? His mother, like I treat her like she's my family, because we've done life together. We've lost, like, we've been homeless together. We've lost things together. We've been in fights, whatever it is. But it's what we choose, you know. And so
I think that there's power in the ability to choose anything, you know. And you know, when it comes to having not blood related family members, it's really crazy how deep a connection can be with anybody that you choose to make a connection with.
Right.
You know, and you, again, that power of choice. You have that choice to allow them to have the access and the ability to access you in whatever capacity and depth that you want, you know. And
that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the giving people that access, right?
Yeah.
You know, because boundaries is a huge thing. And you even talked about your adopted father, the fact that now he is
right
in jail because again he had, you know, abused certain, you know, limitations that you would put on certain things, and you know it is what it is. But I think that's the power of you being strong enough to make boundaries sometimes, rather than there's people in our lives, they might not have put us in sex trafficking, unfortunately, like your father, but there are people who cross our lines, and we have to be strong enough to let them know, hey, listen, this is where it stands. If you cross us, like you'll be exited from my life.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's something that was honestly the most pure and exciting lesson that I learned, was that I actually have control of who accesses me, sexually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it, right? 'Cause growing up in my environment, everything was just open for anybody, right? I had no ability, even if I said no or stop, I had no ability to control what people decided for me. And now that I have gone so far and come so far, I have that ability to say, this is the only access I'm giving you. You know, and it's reciprocated, right? And that's the cool part too. It's like I'm able to be in a friendship or a relationship with somebody where I also have access to that person, and that's an honor, right? Because being in a exploitative situation that I was in, I never had access to them, but they always had access to me. But to have a relationship where there's equal access, and sometimes, some days, some situations, there's more access than, you know, it depends, it's all situational. But to have that is powerful to have now, you know. For sure.
And for anyone who's listening right now who may have also gone through, you know, very traumatic childhood, you know, in the past, you know, what advice would you give them in regards to like not giving up and, you know, possibly reinventing yourself?
Yeah, so I actually started this 40-day prayer challenge yesterday. But in it says, you know, instead of praying for something as soon as possible, like praying that something happens as soon as possible, you pray for as long as it takes. And I think that's really what I've been doing without even realizing how to verbalize that. And I think understanding that when you come from trauma, any depth, any length, any whatever, right, your prayers have to be as long as it takes. You know, there's things that I wish to this day I didn't have to deal with because of my trauma, 7 years out, almost 8 years out. But I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, like I'm accepting that like there's some things that I'm not going to be where I want to be. And I think that's also the you know, the trick in the book is like being able to understand that you're never really supposed to be in a certain place in life. You're just supposed to be and accept where you're at and only want to be more and better the next day. But I think it's really about resiliency, and it's learning who you are, and it's loving who you are. Because at the end of the day, you know, we talked about how, you know, we have people that support us, but then, you know, I don't know if you've ever just like, after being with a lot of people, you go to the bathroom or you go to bed and it's literally just you. And maybe your cats or your pets or whatever, right? Or if you live with somebody, you know, it's like you're at one point or another, you're always going to be in a room by yourself at one point or another. And that's the person that's going to get you through every single thing you've gone through. But you can't get through that without knowing who you are and trusting yourself.
And even with the whole trusting yourself, it's also, like you said, loving yourself, right? Because there's no exchange. No, I don't want a newer model of me. It's like you have to make a newer model of yourself, you know? So, again, thank you so much for your heart, for sharing your strength, for being so vulnerable, because I know, like, even though I didn't realize I'd gone through like certain trauma or whatever, like, you know, earlier in my life, just hearing what you've been through made me that much more grateful for the way that I was brought up, you know? And like I said, even to the point I've never even questioned or given thanks for the fact that I just know when I was born. You know, so.
Who gave birth to you?
Man, you know what I mean? Like that as well. I mean, that's probably still up for grabs, but.
Oh boy, it always will be.
The milkman. No, but But honestly, it's like you're such a light. You know what I mean? I'm so grateful that you can smile and that you can show how beautiful life can still be even after such a dark time. You know what I mean? So again, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for being fearless. And again, I hope that the people out there are inspired to do the same and keep striving to be the best version of themselves, as resilient and as they take it day by day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and I love the work that you do too in the community. And it takes people who are willing to be fearless in their own healing journey to make an impact in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get it.
Thanks.